This two-day forum has been held both online and offline. Today, which is Friday, is the second day of the Monumental Forum. This forum is being broadcasted live via Seoul Education Research and Information Institute's YouTube channel, dubbed Seoul Sam TV.
참고해 주시기 바랍니다. 안녕하십니까?
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm Sojin Kang, your host for 2022 Seoul International Education Forum. So I'd like to thank distinguished guests from home and abroad for joining us yesterday and today as well. Also, those of you who are joining us on site and via TV, thank you very much, and I would like to welcome all of you. And this forum is being held under the theme of actual practice of support for basic academic skill development. We have some esteemed speakers, so please stay tuned. And those of you who are joining us via YouTube channel, please let us know what you're curious about and what type of things you're interested in by typing in the comments. And we will now begin the second day and the second session of this esteemed forum. Firstly, we will invite Hee-yeon Cho, the Superintendent of the Seoul Metropolitan Office of Education. He will deliver opening remarks. So I suppose I don't really have to make opening remarks, and I don't have to say hello to all of you because I did that yesterday. But I suppose I feel obligated rather because I'm on the stage, so I might as well say hello to all of you. Thank you for having me back. So we have suffered from the COVID-19 and we have persevered. And so I have worked day and night to ensure the right to learn, and also when it comes to students' basic academic skills, I suppose it is their right to learn and also develop such skills, and it is our job to ensure that. And what I would like to add here, I suppose in Korea, back in 2019, so that was prior to the COVID pandemic, I brought up the issue of basic academic skills. And I brought up the issue, and also I have allocated the budget, and it was increased from 7 billion to 50 billion. So by putting in that much budget, allocating that much budget, I have made sure that we can use a sort of best combination to ensure that those students can be equipped with basic academic skills. And indeed, it is important to allocate a certain amount of budget and make the best out of it. That type of effort has to have a proper impact. So all of you may know this, but as you all know, so when it comes to basic academic skills, so diagnosis is important, and also when it comes to diagnosis, and also your observation is important as well. And we need diagnostic tools, and also that effort should be accompanied by the government's political support. And in doing so, we should sort of come together and create positive impact. So the big framework is the three-step safety net system. So teachers have been working together, and also we have also brought in the local community. And on top of that, private sector organizations as well. So we have convened all of them and offered this three-stage safety net. So in doing so, in the course of providing that type of safe net, we have ensured that students are provided with proper support. But if you think about the expectations of our citizens, I don't think we have measured up to such expectations. So in each and every step of the way, we have to make sure that what we are coming short on, and also we have to sort of learn from the best practices of overseas teachers and also overseas schools as well. We're doing well as well. So I suppose many of you from overseas can learn from what we are doing as well. So it can go vice versa. And also participants, you can also provide us with your insight. So we will continue to make improvement. And also we have this 3R, right? And also read and arithmetic. So those three factors are 3R. So in my opinion though, so we have this thing called AI literacy, because we are living in the era, we're living in the era, and we will also usher in the new era of AI. So I think our students and our children have to be able to adapt to the changes in the era of AI. So we should sort of have this future focus, future driven decisions as well, and perception. And we have to think about what type of elements or content rather should be included in our curriculum going forward. So many of you are here on site, and also many of the participants are joining us via YouTube channel. So I suppose we are not at the point where we do one thing and it fixes everything. I suppose we are spearheading the effort to achieve improvement in this academic segment. So we are working towards betterment of our academic system. So even if I disappear without saying goodbye to you, please be understanding. Thank you.
말씀해주신 조혜영
Thank you so much,
교수님
Mr. Cho. Please give him a big round of applause.
이어지는 첫 번째 발표는
And the first presentation will be delivered by Sarizanit Kao, Senior Teacher of Academy of Singapore Teachers.
Please welcome Ms. Sernasik Kaur for the
first presentation. 큰 박수로 맞이해 주시기 바랍니다.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to start by thanking our Korean friends for a very, very warm welcome here. It's my first time to Korea, unusually, right? It's quite odd, but yes, my first time, definitely not my last time. And thank you so much for this invite and the warm hospitality. So my name is a mouthful. A couple of you have been asking how to pronounce the name. Just call me Serena for short. And in this short time together, what I hope to share would be some reflections from the ground that I have kind of slowly collected in my many roles in the education service for the last 30 plus years. So as you can see, the title of my sharing is Every Child Wants to and Can Learn. That is really the core of what we all do as educators. I'm going to take you through very quickly the SEN landscape in Singapore. You heard yesterday the multiple pathways that we have. And I'll focus really on the SEN landscape and how we try to message support for SEN across in our mainstream schools. I'll also share 3 key areas that we find have helped us as we try to build this whole community of support for our students within the mainstream. So I'll talk about 3 commonalities. So these are the 3 C's, not the credit card, cash, and car, all right? But really common beliefs, goals, and principles. Okay, I just want to quickly start by doing a recap. You heard a bit about this yesterday. So in Singapore, we do have mainstream schools that support our students with SEN. These are children who have the adaptive and cognitive ability to learn in larger group settings. We also have the SPED schools, or the special education schools, and these are the schools that will be able to provide more customized and intensive support for our learners. A quick overview of the types of support that mainstream schools receive. So support is provided throughout their education journey from primary school at about the age of 7 when they join us in primary school, all the way till the junior college and centralized institutes, which would be a child of about 18 to 20 years old. So these is just a quick overview of the various kinds of supports provided in every school across the various cohorts. All right, so the commonality. When I spoke about the 3 C's, it's really for clarity. So we have these vision, we have these ideas, we have particular approaches that may be more useful in supporting that diversity in the heterogeneous classroom. So this really just distills it for us in terms of a clearer direction to motivate our teachers to work in tandem with one another. So it's really about the common beliefs about teaching and learning, because these may be students in our large class of about 30 or 40 who may challenge some of our own values, our own assumptions, our own beliefs. And so having these common beliefs actually facilitate SEN support for us. Common goals for SEN support, I'll cover that in greater detail. And of course, principles that guide teachers in our approaches. So the title of my sharing actually comes from the Singapore curriculum philosophy. We call it the SCP, and it articulates the core beliefs about teaching and learning. So it really provides that common belief that guides educators to affirm the work that they do and to remind and drive and motivate them that every child wants to and can learn. So it positions the educator as a very critical part of the entire life and learning that goes on in the child's life. Okay, the common goals. These goals are by the Ministry of Education, and you might be thinking, wow, you have these goals, what are they and why do we actually have them? So I'm just going to take you through very quickly our common goals. And the first one being that each child can learn. This goal motivates teachers to adopt a proactive approach rather than a firefighting and a damage control type, where it really exhausts us on a daily basis. So a proactive approach where children with needs will receive timely and appropriate support to achieve their full potential. The second one being that each teacher is skillful. I'm going to spend a little bit more time on this because this is the core role that I play in the ministry at the current time. So it talks about teachers playing that key role in supporting and nurturing our learners. It also encourages teachers to continue to build their own competencies, their capacities, and to engage in lifelong learning so that they can attend to the diverse needs that are coming their way. And the third one is really about each school having the inclusive culture, one which is a whole school approach, rather than one that has a core team who we run to every time we have a challenge or an issue. So it's really a many helping hands approach to support the diversity in our classrooms. So when we say that each child can learn, it really becomes the heart of all that we do. So this is that factor that gels all our decisions, all the practices, the approaches that we may bring into our classrooms. Each teacher being skillful. I mentioned earlier that I'm going to spend a bit of time on this. So this is the Singapore teaching practice. We call it the STP. In education, we've got lots of acronyms, okay? I'll try to unpack it as best as possible for you. But basically, the STP provides a common language to the entire fraternity. So this is housed on a portal. It is a repository of ideas from the fraternity, from educators as well as researchers, and it's a dynamic document that gets populated, gets refined with more lesson examples, with more teaching actions and considerations. So I'm going to very quickly unpack this for you. So if you're familiar, this is the Vanda Miss Joachim, the national flower of Singapore, the orchid. And at the heart of all that we do are our pedagogical practices. Whether it's UDL, DI, multiple intelligences, the core is really the practice in the classroom. And this is anchored by the Singapore curriculum philosophy, that belief I spoke about, where we believe that every child wants to and can learn. So as a teacher, I am motivated to allow that child in my care to learn as best as they can, however unique they are. And this is actually informed by knowledge bases. So an understanding on subject matter and goals, the students and learning and teaching. So this is where the research base comes in to inform the pedagogical practice. And to unpack this even further, what we have are 4 teaching processes. And as educators, we know that these are the key areas that we look at as we design effective lessons. So starting with that positive classroom culture. So how do I create a safe enough environment for my students so that they can learn? So once we consider some of these key areas and factors, we go on to look at our lesson preparation, enactment, and of course, assessment and feedback. I just want to say that sometimes in the busyness of our lives, we jump into lesson preparation and enactment. But these 2 processes are kind of by chance or by the way. But what the STP does is encourage Singapore educators to think about that positive classroom culture that is actually the foundation of any learning that can take place in the classroom. All right, so I'll just show you how we made this dynamic document work for us as we talked about SEN support. So this is STP is out there, it's on our portal, people have been assessing it, but we went to take a deeper dive and we tried to put in the SEN lens to the Singapore teaching practice. So what we did is we poured through the entire document, identified SEN-friendly teaching actions and considerations, and we actually put it down in the portal with a little carrot, the upside down V. So teachers in their very busy lives can just zoom in on the teaching actions, practices, considerations that they may want to explore in their own classrooms. So we also encourage our teachers to look at the document, tweak it according to their learner needs. And we went a little further by providing specific examples that may support a child with SEN a little better. So you would see us adding some ideas like maybe you may want to put in cue cards so that children know how to seek help when they need to seek help. We cannot assume that everything is common sense and they should know. We know as educators that some things may not be so natural to some of our students. And we also provide examples of what these cue cards may look like. So you may have that question, so how do you do this? So my role really is in leading pedagogical practice on a national front. And another part of my work is mentoring teachers. So I have teacher leaders under my purview. I help to support them, I grow them, I develop them so that they can create those ripples of change within their own clusters and schools. So professional development is a huge part of how we message some of these key beliefs, goals, as well as how would I actually do this in my classroom? Are there examples from the ground? So our workshops are not just for teachers. You would see that we have a range. So we have got the middle managers who may be the head of departments, the year heads, etc. We also have platforms to engage school leaders. And we do have specific resource personnel within our schools, the allied educators. We call them the SEN officers, and each school would have at least one. And they look at the skills and intervention-based work, while educators, teachers focus on the pedagogical practice in the classroom. So for teachers, these are some of the things that we do to encourage their growth and development. We do have SEN coverage in pre-service ITP programs. There are bite-sized, practice-oriented online modules. As I mentioned for us, so just to give you a little insight, so far there's just one master teacher, SEN, me. And I'm supposed to be able to grow the fraternity. That's about 33,000 teachers. So this has worked for us. When I say us, I do work very closely with my other colleagues, as well as we do have a SEN division in Singapore. So we created these micro-learning units, about 7 to 10 minutes each, and we encourage TOTL, teacher-owned, teacher-led. So teachers select the bite-sized online modules that are available to them, and they decide whether they want to do it at one go or they want to revisit it. They may choose which MLUs, micro-learning units, they wish to do. Schools may even select some of these bite-sized opportunities for further pedagogical discussions at their own schools. I also run workshops as well as school-based engagement, whether it's classroom observations, etc. If we have certain things to message out, or if we find that a lot of schools are struggling with certain aspects, we do send out school engagement packages. So how does this go out? We are organized in Singapore in clusters, and each cluster may have about 12 to 13 schools, which include the primary schools, secondary schools, and the junior colleges. And we do have one vice principal overseeing the cluster in terms of SEN support. So at least one vice principal. So we engage these vice principals, this VP, who are facilitating SEN support within the clusters. We give them the materials, we take them through it, and they go back to their clusters and share this with the SEN champions. So every school has one SEN champion, and that person will then take it back to their schools to engage their own staff in whatever way that they feel is suitable. We also have the TSN course. This is run as in-service at NIE. And this is for 10% of our primary school teachers and 20% of our secondary school teachers. So we hope that these various platforms will be able to message the national direction and to assure teachers and build that confidence that they can do this piece of work and they can do it very well. So in supporting students with SEN in the entire education system in Singapore, we talk a lot about differentiated instruction. It's similar to a lot of what you have heard so far. We also talk about, a range of collaborative learning experiences. And of course, we also talk about shared responsibility. So in a lot of what I've shared so far, you notice that it is not one group or one team overseeing SEN support in Singapore. It is a many helping hands approach. All right, I'm going to very quickly breeze through this because there were quite a number of references to a tiered system of support, and you would notice that the triangles overlap. So it reminds us that if a child is receiving support at tier 3, maybe a one-to-one pull-out with a certain resource personnel, a learning support teacher or an SEN officer in Singapore's case, we still would need to support this child at tier 1, and we should still be supporting this child well. It's not about babysitting this child at tier 1 because they are being supported at tier 3. So I'm going to give you an example very quickly, and I'm mindful of the time. All right, so I have John in my English language classroom, and John has dyslexia. He lifts entire sentences for comprehension. So in my English language classroom, what I would do is I will ensure that the materials I put out are accessible to John. They are dyslexia-friendly fonts I will use. I'll ensure I use appropriate spacing of at least 1.5, a font size of at least 12, and I will make sure that John also has the opportunity to use a ruler or a blue reading ruler that facilitates reading for those with dyslexia. But in my classroom, I'm not going to single out and say, John, this sheet is for you. I bear in mind John's needs as I plan, design, and enact my lesson. John is also in my remedial class, and I would see him again at Tier 2, where I will use similar materials from my classroom, and I would definitely be teaching him other skills for comprehension like visualization and chunking, but in a smaller group setting. And John is also being supported at Tier 3 by the SEN officer who will be doing decoding skills. So when we do this across the tiers, we will see progress. John will progress from where he was yesterday, where he was last week, or where he was last month. So essentially, what I'm saying is that we bear in mind the needs of these students who are struggling in our classrooms, but what is essential for students like John is actually good for all. So we encourage teachers this way because initially we had quite a bit of questions about, I'm not SEN trained, I'm not confident in this, I'm a mainstream teacher, I may not have time for a separate bag of tricks. So we position SEN support as good, effective teaching. So as we clear that path for the child who needs to use the wheelchair, we are clearing that path for all our students. Another example, this is the visible lesson agenda. I'm sure you have this and you would use this in your own practice in various different forms. My point is, this lesson agenda, if you're familiar with it, is numbered. We list down what we're doing for the lesson, maybe an hour's lesson or 45-minute lesson. We put it up on our whiteboard, on the right side of our whiteboard. We tick off as we progress in the lesson. If I know that I have Mary in my class, and Mary has autism, and she needs routine and predictability, I know that the lesson agenda is going to facilitate learning for her. I would also know that if Mary is rigid and will not do well if there is a change in the sequence, I may not put the 5 minutes in brackets. If I am a teacher who likes to change on the spot, I may not even put the titles or the descriptors. So as we choose anything to bring into our classroom, my point is you would need to be very clear about your own comfort levels as an educator, what you're comfortable bringing in. You would need to think about your learner needs. And if I have Mary in my classroom, I may need to modify this to suit her needs. Having this in my classroom also helps the child with attention issues. Because if I have worked out with Jake that he gets a movement break after my lesson, and if I'm already at number 4, Jake knows just one more part of the lesson and I will get my movement break. If I've got school, student leaders, counselors, or anyone who has gone out to run an errand and just come into your class a few minutes later, that child will also be able to very quickly get on task. So what is essential for children like John, Jake, Mary is actually good for all. So I'm going to sum up with the common key principles. We affectionately call this wisdom, and this helps to guide us in terms of the key tenets of SEN support in the mainstream classroom. So it's not about mollycoddling our students and giving them so much support that they won't know how to actually work on their own. As we plan SEN support, we also think about weaning them and working them from dependence to independence. and this varies for different students. We always intervene based on needs. We talk about equity, not equality. Not everyone in the classroom may need a handy plus at that time. So I've done this in my own classroom, where I actually brought, those handy plus that we use when we hurt ourselves. I gave it out to everyone, and my students looked at me like, why? And then I asked them, so you didn't need it, but today Mary had hurt her finger. Is it okay if I give Mary what she needs and I leave the rest of you out? So we had a little conversation, because in that class, I had a lot of issue with questioning. How come this person gets this, I don't, and why is this person so special? So I did some of these things to bring those messages across, and I think you have many good ideas as well. So the other thing about wisdom is really the documentation, so that we continue to monitor what works. We can also share with others what works and what doesn't. And we organize a community around the child. I think what's very important as educators that we've found very useful is that community around ourselves as well, like what we are doing now. Whether it's through network learning communities, your own professional learning communities or teams in your schools, create those spaces so that we can talk more about what matters most, because every child wants to and can learn. With that, I thank you for your time and the honor of sharing my thoughts with you.
모든 아이는 배우고 싶어하고
So every child would like to learn, and every child can learn. So she has briefed us of all those real-life cases. So thank you so much.
두 번째 사례 발표는
Coming up next,
위한 단계별 기초학력
so
지원
Miss Kate Stout, Assistant Principal of Learning Support Services, Ottawa Carleton District School Board, will deliver her presentation.
큰 박수로 환영해 주시기 바랍니다.
Please give her a big hand.
Thank you very much. I'm also honored to be here today, and I'm thrilled to hear the energy in the room and the similar topics that we all bring to share together. And so I hope today that I'll be able to share with you some concrete and very practical pieces of information that we use in Canada. But also, I think I would like to start by saying I'm warmed, as I said, by the shared energy, and I wish we had more time to talk together and learn together. So thank you for welcoming us. Yesterday, we talked a lot about our shared understanding and reasons of why we're here. And certainly, I think that there's an important piece here to acknowledge that we're all here for the same reasons, and that is to support students, but mostly to center our thinking today and yesterday in supporting those most vulnerable students. And so that's where I ask you to think and land yourself, thinking about the hardest to serve students in your classroom, because when we start there, then we know we're going to reach so many more. The other thing that I think was really key yesterday that some of the speakers brought forward was the importance of the relationship that we have with our students. And it's not just for us to support our students, but actually we as the educators walk away with so much more from what we get from our students. So that was another really key piece from yesterday that I was reflecting upon. So I'll share with you some information today that we, some practical images and pieces that we use in Ottawa in our classrooms, in our inclusive classrooms, really broadly, just for you to be aware that I'm a principal of Learning Support Services, which is a department in our school board supporting students with special education needs. And in our school board, about 85% of students are supported in an inclusive classroom. And so we embed strategies like you've been talking about right into to our classrooms. And today I'm going to focus on the elementary panels. So for us, that would be kindergarten through grade 8. We've taken a huge focus on that early intervention piece, be that for literacy or self-regulation, to try to build skills at that early level, knowing that those skills will translate and move beyond into the secondary years. Peter, my colleague and superintendent, mentioned yesterday that we've been very intentional in our district about knowing students' identities and the intersectionalities that they bring to the classroom. And certainly, we've spent a lot of time thinking about the impact that that has on student learning, but also I think what we're really beginning to know and understand is that we too, as the educators, are bringing biases into the classroom. And so when we bring those biases, we need to be really conscious of how that is impacting and potentially creating barriers for some students. So over the last few years, our district has taken a lot of time to spend important professional development, but also professional or personal journeys as well, through understanding how these biases are impacting our own practice. And so we've really been focusing on creating the learning conditions in our classrooms that all students can access the learning. Specifically, though, we're really highlighting and thinking about those most marginalized students, as I said. And so for our district, we've done a lot of data gathering and thinking about who those students are in our district, specifically students who are racialized, students who come from a low economic situation, and students with special education needs. So this resource, The Third Path, is a resource that our district uses to help guide some of this thinking when we think about those conditions for learning. This is a relationship-based approach, and so what that really is thinking about is how those relationships impact student outcomes. And when we have strong relationships with our students, we know it will lead to better outcomes for them. So this resource outlines these 8 conditions as outlined on the slide: safety, regulation, belonging, positivity, engagement, identity, mastery, and meaning. And it takes those conditions, and the resource outlines specific questions and considerations for educators to think about when they're supporting the students in their classroom. The hope is that we're creating these communities in our classrooms and in our schools where trust and safety is paramount, so students can feel vulnerable when they are struggling, and they'll know that someone's going to support them and someone will be there to help them. Yesterday, we talked a lot about that individualized process and understanding and knowing the individual student in front of you. I think being very aware of the identities of the students who are placed in our classrooms and what they bring into the classroom every single day is really crucial for us to reflect upon in the moment, all the time, to really think about how are we meeting that student's need right there at the center of our planning, in the heart of their learning. Another key shift in some of the work we're doing in our district is really focusing around mentally healthy classrooms. School Mental Health Ontario is a resource that the Ministry of Education has developed, and this resource is I think you're receiving electronic copies of our slide presentation. So it's hyperlinked here, you can click through, but what I would highlight for you is that under each of these themes there are teacher lesson plans, but also resources that help to promote that positive student well-being right in the classroom, in daily classroom activities. And the reason that this is so important to us is really to help destigmatize some of those mental health concerns that are coming forward, and helping everybody understand that mentally healthy classrooms will lead to mentally healthy students. And also, it's okay if you're having a hard time, because we're here in this together, and let's find the supports you need to help move forward. So we've spent a lot of time as a district focusing on these social and emotional learning needs, so that we can really get to knowing the student in front of us, because if we're not feeling well in the morning to come to school, whatever that well may be, it's going to be very difficult for that student to then be able to learn the basic academic skills that we really want them to learn. So I've been a principal in an elementary school and in a middle school, and so I've just brought forward some photos for you of things in my classroom, in my schools, that I thought might be interesting for you to kind of see when we're talking about these conditions, what that might look like. So we would be thinking about opportunities for natural body breaks. You know, when the student goes to the washroom, they can walk down the hallway and skip through the hopscotch or follow the logs, trace their finger on a maze, taking the ladybug through the maze. That might distract them from the exhaustion from their most recent learning. It might give them a break to think about something different. In some cases, the ladybug maze is on a brick wall that is textured, so when they're drawing over the maze, it may create a bit of a sensory stimulation for them to again begin to regulate and be able to come back to class in their just ready state. The last image there of the kindergarten students, those students are working on a shared collaborative activity at an outdoor learning station where the students they were building a maze out of plastic piping that they had to get a ball to go through. And so in this moment, students were, of course, building their problem-solving skills, but they had to do it together, so they had to collaborate. And they had to experience frustration when the ball didn't go the right way and they really wanted it to go this way. They had to, of course, find ways to negotiate with their peers in that moment, but also there was that level of engagement where they were building it, they were doing it in the moment, and they were excited to see when the ball went through. And when they experienced dysregulation or frustration, their educator was right there alongside them to coach them, to help them remember that they have the skills to problem solve it and get through that task. These sorts of opportunities are authentic, they're playful, they're developmentally appropriate, and I was thinking about our professor from Japan yesterday when he shared that these are the skills beyond just those basic academic skills that are necessary for students. It is that learning and how we're going to interact with each other that's going to go beyond the classroom. It's more than just reading and writing and arithmetic. Those are all important. We know that. But if we can't negotiate with our colleagues of how we're going to do it together, that's going to inform how we move forward. Here's just another example from a middle school, a little bit of a more advanced opportunity for students to think about how they're going to regulate themselves. So this is a wellness way, and students would choose which pathway. So they're taking a break from class, they're trying, maybe they're feeling silly, they just, have been sitting in class for a long time, so they would choose the purple pathway. Or maybe they had a frustrating moment, they can't figure out this mathematical problem, I'm frustrated, I could choose the red pathway. And so these are opportunities available in the hallway. A teacher might direct a student, why don't you go to Wellness Way? But also students could self-select going to Wellness Way to find different ways to help them regulate. Another resource that we use in our school district is called the Zones of Regulation. And so this really, the purpose of the Zones of Regulation is to help students visually identify how they are feeling in their body with a color-coded system, and then help them to build skills and think about strategies that might help them to re-regulate or co-regulate. And it helps to normalize that all of us have all of these feelings, but also it helps to allow students to self-select which strategies might work for me best, because what works for me and what works for you might not be the same things. And so by introducing these in the classroom, students are able to think about, well, I would never use that tool. That's not something that would be helpful for me. Or I would try that. I hadn't thought of that one before. So really it helps to, again, break down some of those stigmas and rather give it and have it be free and to everyone in the classroom, that they would know that these are options. Peter yesterday shared some of these foundational principles with you. Certainly Learning for All is a guiding document in the province of Ontario that we use. It highlights the universal design for learning as well as differentiated instruction and the tiered approaches and interventions. So I just wanted to kind of bring you back into some of the thinking from yesterday that Peter had highlighted for us. One aspect that's highlighted in Learning for All that I think is a really important tool that our educators use is around student and class profiles. So these student profiles and class profiles really help the teacher to begin to think about the complexities of learners in their classrooms. Because we all know that whether you have 20 or 30 students in your class, getting to know that individual piece of each person in your classroom is really crucial in terms of building an academic program for them that's going to best meet their needs. And so when we think about a student profile, a teacher is gathering information from a variety of sources, be that their Ontario student record, previous report cards, previous IEPs, maybe there's assessment data in there. They're perhaps interviewing a previous teacher who's had that student before to understand that, and certainly doing their own observations and anecdotal notes of what they know of that student. Then they're outlining some strengths and needs of that student, certain instructional strategies that they have noted to be beneficial for that student, maybe ones where haven't worked as well. And so are there opportunities there for me as the educator to adjust and help to build that skill with that student? The other side is the class profiles. So that's intended to be that class snapshot. What do I know of each of these learners? And as the educator, I'm thinking about different ways to group students. I'm thinking about different ways to support students. I'm thinking about ensuring engagement, knowing that this student is really into science is going to help me as the educator to try to embed maybe more reading about science in their daily activities. These are intended to be dynamic. It's intended to be information that you continue to add to throughout the school year. Everybody changes as we grow and as we learn, and so it's not, this isn't a binder sitting here, but rather, today I'm going to do a lesson on volcanoes. Well, I know that this is going to really appeal to some and certainly not to others, so how am I going to engage them all so that this topic can be available to them all? We've all spoken about tiers of intervention, and so I don't want to spend too much time here because I want to keep getting through. I think we're all familiar and have talked about these tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 approaches, and so I'm going to share some, again, some practical pieces here that for you to consider from classrooms that I've been a part of. Certainly those tier 1 strategies, what's good for one supports many. I'll highlight for you kind of the importance of those multiple entry points, but also strategies such as an I do, we do, you do type of strategy where I'm going to guide you as the teacher. It's a gradual release of that learning opportunity. I'm going to notice as the educator and monitor which areas you seem to be struggling with as you move towards independence. And at the end, when that independence the learning goal is fulfilled with you independently, I'm going to know that you've done that because I've watched you through those phases. Certainly scaffolding, so what does a student need to accomplish that goal? It's not about reducing the expectation. The learning goal maintains. We are all going to get there, but how I get there and how you get there might be two different ways. So building those steps up so that each individual learner can get to the learning goal as opposed to moving the learning goal. We don't want to move the learning goal. Everybody can achieve it, but doing that in a systematic way is really important. We certainly highlight anchor charts, those co-created posters on the wall where you would have a student being able to see what the learning goal is and how am I going to move them forward to getting those goals. Sending students back to those co-created charts are really important. The other part I'd like to highlight for you are some of the screening tools that we're using in our district. So this gets down to that real finite understanding of where is the student struggling and how can we help to move them forward. And so in our district, we developed these reading decision trees. So a teacher has a flow chart to really look at, okay, I know that this is going okay this way, we're moving forward to this, but all of a sudden the student's struggling here. What am I going to do next? So this decision-making tree helps the educator think about each individual learner's path and their development of reading, in this one in particular. Dibbles is a screening tool that we use to, again, help to really identify when a teacher notices that gap, help to identify where is the gap, and then think about what is my next best move. In some cases, it might be accessing a program like Lexia. That's a tier 2 intervention in our district, but it really hones in on decoding skills. And after we are able to think about if that is working or is not working, what might be the next step. Leaps and bounds is another example in mathematics of a screening tool that we use to help determine. Here's some really concrete examples of students in our classrooms, thinking about how students, the instructional accommodations we might need, as well as the environmental accommodations a student might need, or the assessment accommodations. Concretely, environmentally, we're thinking about the lights, the noises. We're thinking about if a student needs to wiggle, if a student needs access to a body break. And for assessment, we're thinking about, is an oral assessment more appropriate for this student, or does a student need to build something, to draw it, to show me their learning? And then we've talked about visuals, and we've talked about kind of the importance of following that flow of the day. Maybe there are visual cues to help prompt a student in kindergarten. In Canada, it's cold. We have a lot of clothes we have to put on in wintertime. If you put your boots on before you put your snow pants on, it's not going to work for you. So those visual cues are really helping organize that thinking so that a student can continue to develop, but also what you might need in a day. And then, of course, handheld visuals. When a verbal cue is not working for a student, sometimes a visual cue is an important one. It's time to be quiet now. We're not going through that door. It's time to stop. And bringing back to some of those conditions, opportunities for self-regulation within the classroom are really crucial. So we have calming corners, sensory tools, breathing activities. Lastly, I'll highlight the use of special equipment. Certainly there are needs for students who, using assistive technology, having access to certain sensory materials and self-regulation tools are really important. These are documented in a student's individual education plan, but also the purpose here is to help them access the curriculum. And so providing this equipment is that tool. Tier 2, we're moving towards the collaboration, of course, between teacher and the school-based special education team. And so here you might see a little bit more structured support for the student, be that task completion bins, trackers. These are developmentally appropriate for a primary age student, but you could have a checklist for a middle school age student, or a color-coded system that might help them. In addition, you might see some individual workstations, social stories to support that social skills development. If a student is having difficulty managing their frustration or unsure of how to navigate a social situation on the schoolyard, we would script it for them and give them the opportunity to practice that in a structured setting with an educator. We've spoken about small group instruction. Again, that's taking the screener. We've now implemented perhaps Lexia to help them build their literacy skills, but we're still noticing some differences. So now we're going to move to a small group instruction, 6 to 8 weeks, target the skill, reassess, double check where we're at. Have we made the gains we were hoping to make? Body breaks, we've talked about that 5-minute active body for a student who has attentional difficulties. Get your body going and then calm your body, bring yourself back to that just right learning zone. Tier 3, we're moving beyond the classroom support and we're looking at some of our central supports. And so in our school district, we do have access to central teams who can come into the school to support the school-based team. We also might be looking at involving community agency at this point and making sure that we're building that community around the student, as we've all talked about, and that the parents and the student's voice is actively involved and a part of that conversation. Lastly, I'll just highlight for you the importance in our district of writing an individual education plan. This, of course, is a written document that helps guide teachers and parents and principals through special education programming. It highlights their strengths and needs and helps to look at what accommodations might be needed, if modifications to a curriculum might be needed, or if an alternative curriculum might be needed to support them. This is intended to be a working document, and it is intended to be fluid and supporting and changing throughout the student's schooling year. As I mentioned, these are some of our guiding documents. They are hyperlinked in the electronic version, so you can go in and check those out. These are from the Ministry of Education. But I think ultimately what I would like to end with today is to remind you that these are the key documents and resources that we use, but really it's what we know about the student that brings us to guide our practice. And so with that, I will say thank you for your time today, and I've enjoyed my learning.
모든 학생들을 위한 학력 개선 사례와
creating an enabling environment for all and cases of stage-based intervention.
Want me to go back to elementary school. 다음은 데이터 기반 교수를 통한 학생의 초기 쓰기 능력 향상을 위한
Now,
주제로 미국
I'd like to invite Dr. Erica Lemke. She's going to make a presentation about the Early Writing Project, Evidence-Based Assessment and Intervention for Struggling Writers. She sent a video lecture. Let's watch the video.
Hi there, I'm Erica Lemke from the University of Missouri, and I'd like to tell you more about the Early Writing Project, a project that has been a collaborative effort between Kristen McMaster at the University of Minnesota and myself over about the last 10 years. This project, as I mentioned, is a collaboration between teams at the University of Missouri and the University of Minnesota. And the purpose of this project, funded by the Institute on Education Sciences, has been to develop and then scale up data-based individualization, or DBI, in early writing. The goal to be to improve teachers' outcomes in knowledge and skills in DBI in early writing, and also to improve student outcomes. There are lots of important reasons why we chose writing. There's lots of clear data to show that we are behind in meeting national outcomes in the US in terms of writing proficiency. And also it's very important that students have work on writing outcomes that will lead to both later vocational success and literacy success. DBI, or data-based instruction, is really a framework that encompasses several steps that teachers can use to help support their students in both instruction and adaptation of that instruction. Teachers begin with a present level, establishing a present level of performance in writing. They set a goal for each student with whom they're working, implementing high quality intervention, and then monitoring the progress of how that intervention is functioning for the student. Along the way, they continue to evaluate how instruction is working for students using decision-making rules. And then if instruction is not working, collecting some diagnostic data that they can utilize to make an instructional change. This process has continued throughout the time the teacher is working with the student. In our early writing project, we model off of the simple view of writing, which was created initially by Virginia Berninger and her colleagues. In this simple view of writing, there are three basic components: transcription, text generation, and self-regulation. All of these components then are constrained by the attention and memory that the students bring to the task. So transcription is those earliest skills in writing, things like handwriting, spelling. Text generation is more content-driven, turning ideas into words and passages. And finally, self-regulation includes things like self-monitoring, revising, editing. The primary components of our initial project were DBI TLC, tools that included things like measures that the teachers could use, intervention materials, learning in the form of professional development for the teachers, face-to-face workshops, and coaching that was provided as collaborative support. Our second grant, or actually our first grant that we received, the first in a series of two federally funded grants that supported the early writing project, we were in the development phase, developing and then testing out feasibility and piloting our tools, learning, and collaborative support approach. Our theory of change was really driven by the notion that DBI again, data-based instruction implemented with fidelity would impact eventually student writing outcomes and teacher knowledge and skills. We hoped that implementing DBI with fidelity would include things like improvements in curriculum-based measurement, implementation, and intervention fidelity. We developed both tools, toolboxes, if you will, for measuring, progress monitoring, intervention, and data-based decision-making, but also a coaching cycle, including coaching forms that were developed to support each teacher. In year 2 of that initial project, we tested out the usability and feasibility of our materials by asking teachers for their opinion, by collecting data in focus groups, by having them briefly implement some of our materials and give us feedback. We found out more about our materials that allowed us then to modify over time and create a better set of materials going forward. In the pilot study, in that first project, our goal was to find out more about whether teachers could implement with fidelity, and then when teachers use these materials, if we saw student improvement. Throughout the time that we worked with teachers and students, we did see positive and promising outcomes as a result of implementation of that early developed materials. We connected these materials, like our assessments, to that simple view of writing. So here we see one of the measures that we've developed. This is a curriculum-based measure, or CBM. This is a word dictation or word level measure where a teacher dictates words and students write those words in 3 minutes. Here's an example of a student's score sheet, the words that the student has written in 3 minutes. And in a minute, I'll tell you more about how these are scored. Another measure was at the sentence level. This was a picture word task where students are provided pictures and words, and they have 3 minutes to independently write sentences about those pictures and words. And then finally, a story prompt measure was used. This was more at the text generation level, while those earlier measures, word dictation, picture word, could be used at the transcription or text generation level. A story prompt measure is where a brief story starter is provided to students. They have 30 seconds to think and then 3 minutes to write. The measures are scored in unique ways, including using words written or words spelled correctly or correct letter or word sequences. And so we teach teachers to look at, for instance, individual pairs of words and make a decision about whether these words make sense in the context of the sentence, whether they're spelled correctly, whether the sentences have correct capitalization and punctuation. So along the way, there are a variety of scoring methods that teachers can utilize to get more limited information, perhaps, in the form of words written, or more detailed information in the form of correct sequences. We also used a literature review to identify best evidence-based practices in instruction to create mini lessons, as we called them, that teachers could utilize in the areas of transcription, text generation, to help support students' instruction. Self-regulation was also a component, largely supported by the work of Karen Harris, Steve Graham, and their colleagues in the form of self-regulated strategy development. These interventions led to a set of mini lessons that we could provide that allowed explicit instruction in handwriting, in spelling, in text generation that teachers could implement 3 times a week. Here's an example of some of those lessons that we created in terms of both transcription and text generation, as I mentioned before. These lessons were arranged hierarchically, and lessons were about 5 to 15 minutes in length so that teachers could choose individual mini lessons, put those together to create a more full instructional plan for students. Along the way, we also had many measures of fidelity that we were using, both in terms of implementation of curriculum-based measurement, in terms of implementation of teacher lessons, coaching that was provided to our participants. We provided professional learning in the form of workshops to teachers on our early writing assessment and intervention materials, and then provided coaching to those teachers. Teachers completed pre and post tests, and students also completed both progress monitoring measures and standardized tests pre and post. They implemented for 16 weeks in our original study. We are now finishing the second of our federally funded projects. We're in year 4 of 4. We are currently analyzing that data, so stay tuned for those results. In this scale-up project, we've had 140 teachers across 2 states and 3 years of implementation. We have randomly assigned teachers to treatment condition and business as usual in this current study. In the future, we need to continue to look at important and flexible ways to improve professional development, that's PD, and ways to be flexible in our delivery of that PD. We want to continue to consider sustainability of these practices, and we need to continue to look at both mediators and moderators, things like teacher knowledge and skills, what are some mediating effects of those, moderators that might affect teacher and student characteristics, considering things like amount of experience, how long teachers have been teaching special education, and even perhaps the type of student that teachers are working with. Could be English language learners, students with learning disabilities, students with behavioral needs. How might that affect outcomes? We know from our earliest studies and the continued studies that we completed that this process of using DBI in early writing can be very successful. We've seen very promising results, and teachers comment and feel like their ability to implement grows over time, strengthens, but they still continue to have some questions about essential features, and we need to continue to study that sustainability, as I mentioned earlier. I'm glad to tell you just a little bit about our early writing project. You can find more information on our website, earlywritingproject.org, or feel free to contact me. My email is below. Thank you.
데이터 기반 교수법에 대한 사례와 전문성 신장에 대한 필요성을 말씀해 주신 감사합니다.
Yeah, thank you so much for your presentation. We will have a 5-minute break, and we will continue our afternoon session with 2 presentations delivered by other teachers. Thank you.
이어서 섹션 2에 기초학력 지원에
And now, throughout the session 2, we will continue to hear more about real-life cases of supporting basic academic skill development. So we will invite Sukyung Park, teacher at Seoul Elementary School. She will discuss real-life practices of guiding students to build basic academic skills in elementary schools.
안녕하세요. 서울 사는
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Sukyung Park, teacher at Seoul Elementary School. So what I would like to discuss today is real-life cases and practices of guiding students to learn basic academic skills in elementary schools. So I'm not obviously the representative of the entire group of teachers in elementary level, but I have been working as an elementary school teacher for the past 3 decades. And we have about 20 students in one class. So as you can see, it's a quite small class. So many teachers may think, oh, this is the current status in elementary schools, but that's not the case. Our school has very small, unusually small classes. So let's take a look at the video of the daily life of an elementary school teacher.
학교 가기 싫다. 가야지. 네가 선생님인데?
반가운 만큼 힘도 들지만 이 순간을 기다려왔잖아요.
네, 초등학교 선생님들이라면 다분히 이해할
So as an elementary school teacher, you might be able to relate to this. Maybe this is sort of odd
이렇게 생각하실 수
to those of you who are not elementary school teachers. So let's take a look at another
있죠. 퍼스널 트레이닝해서
video clip.
헬스장에 가면
So you know personal trainers. So when you go to gym, you have your PT and you do exercise with him or her.
그래서 유명 연예인이
So there was a TV commercial,
나와서 보여주는
and this person who appears to be doing nothing to do with the education, but he came out and did this.
열심히만 하면 되는데 왜 그걸 못해?
이런 말 지겹지?
알아. 노력하는 게 제일 힘든 거.
근데 오늘부터 쉬워질 거야. 퍼스널 티칭. 이제 공부도 PT 받는 거야.
기억해. 퍼스널 티칭.
퍼스널 트레이닝
So personal training, and also PT can interpret it as personal teaching. So this is a reason why this actor said PT could also be study PT. So so I was concerned about this because I thought this type of thing should be provided in school. But I welcome this development at the national level. So of this, the support plan to guarantee basic academic skill development in Seoul, I thought it was important to provide and allow students to realize accountable education. And when I took a look at this 3-stage learning safety net, so this word sort of stood out, homeroom teacher. So homeroom teachers should help students who are vulnerable or who need help. So as a homeroom teacher, so let's take a look at how we can strengthen the guidance on basic academic skills in class. So there are 3 keywords: diagnosis, correction, and management. To the first stage for elementary school teachers is to find out where the starting point is. So this happens for 1 month in March, and throughout the classes, you can take a look at the basics, the academic skills, and whether the support is needed for certain students. So we do classroom teaching, observation, and counseling as well. So we as elementary school teachers have a lot to do, but we have to have rapport with parents as well, so that we can sort of work as a team to help students.
그다음에 이제 분석을 하게 되는데
And we do the analysis to ensure systematic correction is done.
중에 몇몇은 단순 학습
So there are some students who are struggling with learning loss. Some may have simple learning loss, and some may have learning loss caused by multiple factors. So for those with a simple learning loss, the correction can be done in school, and they can get support from co-teacher. So the catered education can be provided to these students. And also we provide additional support such as the Teacher Long Legs program. So during the winter or summer breaks, these students get extra help from their teachers. So about students with learning loss caused by multiple factors, I'm going to talk about them later on. So as a teacher, I try to make sure that this type of learning loss does not happen. And now I will share a personal story. So this is the motto that I have. My catchphrase, sort of catchphrase of my life is to let homeroom teachers to take responsibility, take charge of everything. So for first graders, we need to help the students to read and write Hangul. Second graders, they should be able to read books, write a diary, and etc. Third graders, they should be able to read books, write, and do math. For fourth graders, it would be difficult for homeroom teachers to take charge in all of these because those students are advanced. So these Hangul, math, English, these can be sort of provided to students, first grader, second grader, third grader students from homeroom teachers. So when it comes to Korean language, if first graders and second and third graders get to learn and build a reading habit, and it's going to take them a long way. So the first graders do read and write Hangul, and second graders get to write a diary, and third graders should be able to summarize and write an essay. So, for example, to help students to build a reading habit, so they come in the morning. Obviously, students every day they come in the morning, and they are sent to the library. So every single student is sent to the library, and that activity is checked. So 100% participation is guaranteed. So they have this assignment to read longer than half an hour. But this cannot be sort of checked by me every single day, which is where parents come in. So they make a checklist, and they write whether or not their kid actually read something for half an hour. So we called the parents up and check. Some students are interested in insects, and they read books about insects. And some students go and read very difficult books. And then in those cases, I send the students to the library and ask them to choose a book that fits their competency level. So this is the documentation that I sent to my students' parents. So I have a comment written here. So I said there is a student, well, this student in particular gets a lot of wrong answers on word dictation assignment. And it turned out that he didn't really read much. So we had to do the corrective measures based upon that. And to do so, we also get the funding support from the government. So students get to read, and also they sometimes publish a book as well. So they get to learn, oh, books are actually related to our everyday life. And so you would be wondering how these students can be catered to read and write. And as I said, my class is about, it is inclusive of only 15 to 20 students. So this example shows the second grader's diary, pardon me, writing. So this type of notebooks are distributed at the beginning of the semester, and so those simple sentences, and they work on only these simple sentences at first, and then they get to make some improvement, and they actually do the writing. So this type of writing was done because the type of note, as you can see, changes. So the student that I guided got to use an advanced level notebook and make longer writing. And also the student who was struggling to write essays, I decided to buy a book for him. So I read this book with him, and we did that for 3 times. And I asked him to write everything in that book word to word. So if this happens every single day throughout the winter or summer break, they get to make achievement and advancement. So in doing so, we can help students. I could help students overcome their shortcomings. And when it comes to arithmetics, the second graders, they have a lot to do. So I'm a homeroom teacher of the 3rd graders. So the most important things when it comes to arithmetics is the multiplication and division for 3rd graders, and addition, and also subtraction, multiplication table are important for the 2nd graders. But if someone puts in about 40 hours, then those students who don't put in as much hour and effort, they cannot possibly catch up. So it is important to analyze what a student did and also what he got wrong or right. And based upon that analysis, we get to have one-on-one discussion with a particular student and parents as well. So we manage this type of mathematical competency of students using this type of documentation. So when a student is struggling, we bring him in and have discussion and let him know that he's coming short on certain factors and certain elements. And we also speak to the parents as well. So those who are 3rd graders but who do not meet the requirements of the 3rd graders, perhaps they can take a look and learn from using the 2nd grader textbooks. So when it comes to English, pardon me, I'll just have a sip of water. So as I said, I'm a homeroom teacher of 3rd graders. So they are supposed to be able to read and write English alphabet. So there are some students who are struggling to learn English and alphabets. So to be sure, homeroom teachers do not teach students English. So rather, we have a specialized teacher teaching English. So 3rd, 4th, 5th graders. So if homeroom teachers get involved, even though those elementary school teachers do not teach 3rd, 4th, 5th graders English, she can still manage to see whether or not students are actually meeting their goals. And this is the test that we did on students, and this particular student didn't know the difference between B and D. And we also used digital textbooks and also English games as well to help students learn better. And we have this game called Jump Up. I majored in English, so I do teach my students English. So the mom sister, this is the material that we use this semester. So teachers get to should be aware of the content. So far I have covered all the things that homeroom teachers should be in charge of. But this right here is about students with multi-factored learning loss. And these students have issues which homeroom teachers cannot resolve on their own. So which student is struggling? Is it A on the left-hand side or right? B on the right-hand side? So this is written by my student. So that period, it takes quite a long time for my student to put this period. Mathematics as well. If you take a look, he's doing the division, but it takes over a minute to just draw a line. So it takes about 40 minutes for him to solve a problem that can be solved by other students within 4 or 5 minutes. But if I give him about an hour or 2 hours and enough time, then he can do very well. The first graders and second graders, I get a list of those students with learning loss. So this student in particular was with autism spectrum student. So I spoke to the mother that indeed he had this type of problem. She wasn't convinced, but it took about a year for me to have her on board. So it is important to have rapport, and it is important for teachers and parents to have a consensus on dealing with these issues. So which is why in March, you as teachers should build a strong relationship with parents. So if you build that type of relation from the get-go, you can do a lot better in supporting students. So based upon the information that I got from his previous teacher, I recommended him to get psychological help. So as you can see, there's a teacher surrounded by multiple students. So we don't get to have a lot of one-on-one time with our students, but if we are to do so, if we are to guarantee students' right to learn, then homeroom teachers should take charge. They should be obligated to take their responsibilities, and they should be competent enough to do their job well. And also the classroom size should be small. It should be inclusive of about 15 to 20 students. And also we need to focus on teaching, not administrative or paperwork. So once again, the homeroom teachers should do their very best to guarantee that no student is left behind. Thank you so much.
As an elementary school homeroom teacher, she shared a good case of diagnosis and problem solving. Thank you very much, Teacher Park Soo-kyung, for taking good care of your students for a year. Now I'd like to invite Teacher Yumiran from Jongam Middle School. She's going to make a presentation about saving slow Jongami with a finely woven school net. Please welcome her with a big round of applause. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am teaching Korean at Jongam Middle School, and also I'm the head of the Future Education Division at my school. My school is located in Seongbuk District in Seoul. We have 23 classes, and a total of 505 students are in my school. Considering the location and characteristics of our students, so our school is the mid-sized school, and it is located in the middle of the apartment complexes and the villa housing complexes. The level of the academic achievement and performance is mid-level in Seoul. And also, given the location, you can feel the vibe of the rural areas in my school. Earlier, Ms. Park shared her story about educating and guiding students lacking basic academic skills. But now I'd like to talk about how the school has saved students lacking basic academic skills. So please pay attention to my presentation. So what my school did, that is the focus of my presentation. My middle school is just a typical middle school, but one thing that makes it stand out is that it was designated as a future innovative school by the government. So we had a lot of time to talk about the vision and dreams. So what is future school? What is the innovation? So we had a lot of discussions with colleague students and colleague teachers. So one thing we had the same understanding about is that future school should be one where all students can learn. So there should be technologies should be the foundation for learning for all. So you cannot achieve a future school overnight, realistically. So we focus on children who have dire needs, who cannot participate in mainstream classroom or class lessons because they are lacking basic academic skills. We are aware of their existence in our classrooms, but we didn't have room for accommodating them because we had to move on with the curricula. But after the designation of our school as a future innovative school, we decided to create a foundation for all the students to participate in learning. So we decided to reflect relevant policies, and we wanted to create an enabling environment where teachers can develop their own professional capacity. And also, inside classroom, teachers should have enabling capacity. And also inside school, we should make efforts. But we all know that it takes a lot of efforts and time. The changes do not happen overnight. So we wanted to make efficient work within the school to achieve that. And also outside school, we wanted to engage communities. So we focus on individual students with needs. And I believe that all the elders and community members and teachers should work around these individual students. And also, it is important to create a student profile. So I am very honored to stand here, even though I feel nervous here. Last year, we had an opportunity to read some Ontario's case, Education for All. So from that, we got an idea of creating student profiles. So we are actually applying that to our school, and I'm very honored and thankful to be able to share our case where we applied a Canadian case in my school. So we saved our students So it's not just happened based on some teachers' sacrifices. We wanted to make it possible based on school network or school systems. So within classroom, we created teachers community, and also we created the opportunity to share our lessons and teaching practices with colleague teachers at school at least once a year. So here, math teacher is introducing about speaking or presentation task within the math class. So not just making an approach to problem solving, this teacher adopted different methods. So DI also suggests many different methods for teaching. So this math teacher linked the math teaching to speaking and writing. And in the first grade, we have co-teachers for math and Korean. So in my class, a co-teacher is helping me. So in front of the students, I am leading and conducting the class. And our co-teacher is on the side. On the side of the class, there is a screen. So there, she's standing there and she gives feedback to students. And there's a group activities going on. So those groups who finish their task, they work with the co-teachers. So based on the research, the most effective method of teaching is giving feedback to students. So we were able to give as much feedback as possible to our students with the help of co-teachers. So not only for the poor achievers, but also for the mid or upper level students, they could improve their performance based on the feedback from co-teachers. And outside school, what we did, we hired a team dedicated to helping our students. Last year, we hired a teacher, and we categorized the teacher's title as a duty teacher. And this year, she's helping us as a part-timer, and she is performing the improvement measurement. She is conducting the improvement measurement, and also after-school activities are also helped by these duty teachers. And counseling, and also when we have somebody from the outside study center, the scheduling with students is also done by these duty teachers. So having a good relationship with students is really difficult. So in order to make your students study, you need to have some good relationship with your teachers, with your students. So these duty teachers helped us create many events and activities where we can build good relationship with our students. So in order to make our work more efficient, we made a lot of efforts as well. So when we offer after-school activities, so each teacher is creating the progress report, but one teacher didn't do it alone. So all these teachers, they share these progress reports. So each subject matter teacher shares this progress report, and other subject matter teacher can access this information. So in one shared document per student, this kind of a progress report is written. So other teachers can learn about what's going on with the student with other teacher. So shared documents actually made work a lot more efficient. And outside school, there is a Seoul Study Support Center. And also there are centers in each district under the Ministry of Education or the Office of Education. So when we find students with some difficulties and we invite or we bring the students to the Seoul Study Support Center. And also, if there are students with some difficulties that cannot be addressed by teachers, for example, dyslexia, then we bring those students to a clinics. And also, Seoul Study Support Center supports and the counseling with parents as well. So basically, through these systems, we are guiding and teaching students with poor academic skills. I'd like to share one case. The system, school system or supporting systems are important, but what's more important is the condition of a student who is getting support from those systems. So let's look into this case. So I met this student named Jongam last year. So I met the student and his achievement scores based on S-basic test show that he is very poor in Korean language. And so I had a counseling with this student, and he is 8th grade, but he confessed to me saying, actually, I don't know how to read and write Korean. So I met with his homeroom teachers and everybody. But in other subject matters, when I talked to his other teachers, he was okay. But when it comes to Korean language, he didn't know how to read and write. So we have scheduled the dyslexia test for him. So he was diagnosed with dyslexia and he started to get treatment. So these people involved in helping him. So this person at the top is the professional with a dyslexia, and the other 2 teachers, including myself, helped him, and we learned about his diagnosis result, and we had a meeting how to help this boy. So from August to October, Jongami went to Kookmin University Dyslexia Clinic. And also, he started to learn how to read as part of his after-school activities. At the end of the semester last year, he sent this letter to me because I'm a Korean language teacher. He said, in the letter, he said, "Teacher, thank you very much for helping me to learn how to read. I wasn't confident in reading, but thanks to you, I gained confidence. You helped me a lot. I thank you very much." At the end of this letter, he said, "I thought myself I am incapable of reading." That actually touched me a lot. So for the past 6 years, he thought, I'm incapable of learning how to read, but finally he was able to read. So as of 2022, this is Jongami's progress report. I don't teach him anymore because he's a 2nd grade, but through the shared documents, I can access his progress report. Even though it's in small fonts, it says he finished reading a novel titled Long, Long Night. And he is currently reading another book titled The Luck is on the Way. So even though he's slow in reading still, he only had a dyslexia. His intelligence was normal. So we got to actually help him and save him. So now he is expanding his learning to other subject areas. This is Jongami that I met in 2021. So another Jongami, which is the pseudo name, in 2022, I met this 종아미. So in 2021, the diagnosis test was as basic test. But this year, another test was added, literacy test. When you conduct an as basic test, there are a lot of loopholes in this test. So the attitude with which you take this test, even though if you have bad attitude, you will be categorized as a underachiever. So if you diligently take this test, even though you are actually underperformer, the score can come out as you are normal student. So there's a literacy test added. But this 종아미, this student, in terms of as basic, his language proficiency was okay. But when he took the literacy test, he actually scored 540, which is below the average. So all the teachers shared this information. So literacy is the basis for other subject learning. So we wanted to increase his literacy. So when it comes to math and English, so he got feedback in class, and also he got additional supports as part of the after-school activities. As you'll know, the biggest problem with these students is that they don't like to come to you after school, even though we want to teach him in a supplementary class. They don't like to come to you. That's the problem. But still, his homeroom teacher made sure to bring him to a supplementary class. Or other subject teachers decided to teach him early in the morning before the regular class starts. So I'm teaching this student this year. So in every class, I make him write what to do in this class. So on May 7th, he finally wrote like this. But up until May, he was unable to write. So it took 2 months for him to write this simple journal and schedule. Of course, he couldn't perform other tasks. But this is his journal as of November. Right before the Korean language class starts, I made him write for 3 minutes. So the topic was, what is the different characteristics of myself? And he wrote like this. Even though his spelling is wrong, so let me decode it. My special characteristics are that I'm good at sign language. It is because my parents have a speech impairment. That's why, and they can't hear well, so I am good at sign language. And another 3-minute writing. The topic is what you are most thankful for 2022. So under this topic, he wrote his essay for 3 minutes. So this kind of writing actually helpful for him and also other students as well. So under this topic, he indicated one of the classmates and said, thanks to this friend, I was able to learn better because he patiently helped me. To me, this kind of writing is really a miracle. It took almost several months for him to be able to express himself in writing. And from November this year, he decided to open up to his teachers. So his parents, both of his parents use sign languages, so they can't speak really well. They only use physical ability, but as a result, he was not good at expressing himself verbally or in writing. So we were able to save him. But I hope this story shouldn't be heard as a case of somebody's sacrifice. So in one of the teachers' meeting, one of the teachers said, we need to think we are always start from scratch every day, because if you try to improve your students, every day you'll be frustrated. So you always think that you're going to go back to square zero and start all over again. So basically, it's not by students a teacher's sacrifice. It should be backed by finely woven system. So on a daily basis, there should be an enabling support for these students. And we will do our best to achieve that. And I would like to ask you to make the same efforts. Thank you very much.
So she delivered a speech on what is happening at Chongam, and it was heartwarming. So we now conclude the session 2, the presentations on the real life cases. We're going to have a short break, and we will resume with the open discussion. Thank you.
지금부터 2022 서울국제교육포럼 세션 2의 자유토론을 시작하겠습니다. 자유토론은 기초학력 지원의 실제라는 주제로
under the topic of actual support for basic education. Professor Lee Dae-sik from Kyungin National University of Education will moderate this session. Please welcome him with a big round of applause.
So would it be okay for me to take off my mask? Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm Tae-sik Lee, professor of Kyungin National University of Education. It is such an honor to chair this discussion. So once again, it is such an honor to share this discussion. So this second session was the open discussion was supposed to be joined by Mr. Choi, our superintendent, but he could not make it today. So we have Director Yang Il-sik from Seoul Metropolitan City of Office of Education. So we have Sarinajit Kaur, Senior Teacher at Academy of Singapore Teachers. So we have Kate Stout, System Principal of Learning Support Services, Ottawa Carleton District School Board. And we have Sugyong Park, Seoul Sagan Elementary School. We have Miran Yu from Chongan Middle School. So unfortunately, Professor Lemke could not join us. So I would like to ask a director, and I have two short questions for you. So I would like to know more about Seoul Metropolitan Office of Education's policy and political support for students with learning difficulties, and also to build the basic academic skills. So what type of support do you provide? So after the pandemic, what is being an issue is to make sure that our students get to develop basic academic skills. So we have this 3-stage safety net. So this type of support is provided, and also within school we have a lot of support teams available. And outside of school, we also partner up with local communities and also entities from the private sector. And next year, we will continue to work to ensure the development of basic academic skills. And I listened to all of your presentations, and it was interesting that all of you mentioned that teachers are important. And it is important for us to help teachers grow their level of competency. So when it comes to basic academic skills, I suppose it is a human rights issue, because students rightfully should learn and develop basic academic skills. And as you said, so we have a wide range of sort of tools and strategies to guarantee the development of such skills. And also the relevant budget has gone up continuously, as Superintendent Cho mentioned. So we should do diagnosis, and also after the diagnosis is made, perhaps we should come back within a year or so to monitor whether or not the improvement has been made. So in 2023, we will look into this and we will come up with measures to improve upon the current system. So indeed, we should improve our legacy system. Thank you. Thank you for your answer.
I have prepared some questions, and also we received questions from YouTube channel. So if possible, I'd like to ask the questions from our teachers first. This is a long question, so let me read it out. Please translate it well. Singaporean case was very interesting. I want to learn more about two things. First, you mentioned creating a positive environment before the class and also building capacity for teachers. So what do you do to create a positive environment before the class? Would you please share some cases with us? Second, in order to help teachers build their capacity, your country provides many training programs and workshops. We do the similar things in Korea, but what are the characteristics of the teachers' capacity building workshops in your country? So did you understand the questions?
I hope I did. All right. So I'll touch on the first one about positive classroom culture. The question asks for a few examples. So what we encourage is for teachers, I think everyone does the same, to spend time to do this right at the beginning of the academic year. For us, it's in January, and then the next semester starts after the June holidays, and a reminder to recap this. The difference is being extremely explicit and clear. So thinking about what is age appropriate, what is relevant, what would I need so that it clears all the distractions to learning. This would include intentional, purposeful sitting arrangements, how I actually start a lesson, how I would end the lesson, routines and expectations very clearly articulated to our students. We also encourage teachers to encourage ownership amongst their students. So have it in terms of a discussion, a grounds up. What do you think you need so that you can learn better? So these are what we call classroom management strategies and skills that all teachers will put in place. We remind teachers that actually it's not just about classroom management, order in your classroom, but what you are intentionally doing is clearing the distractions and white noise to learning. When students know how to ask a question, they know that, okay, I need to raise my hand. And we try to communicate with other subject teachers to ensure that it is aligned. Otherwise, younger kids struggle. And if they are already struggling with coming into a primary school, they have a learning need, they have a behavioral need, it becomes quite difficult for them. So taking the child through for younger children for positive classroom culture, what we encourage in the STP is also demonstration. Don't just verbalize, but show how I can answer a question, how you expect me to submit my work. Is there a particular tray in the class, or is this done at the beginning of the lesson or at the end of the lesson? So thinking through what you would like to have in your classroom and taking your students through. The second question is about capacity building. I think a couple of things that are done would be really to encourage multiple platforms. Speaking the same language, so when we talk about the SCP, the STP, this is common language that we use in our workshops. So that's the national direction. And I may conduct, for example, a workshop on harnessing inclusive pedagogy. How would I do this in my biology classroom? How would I do this in my geography, mathematics, English classroom? So teachers realize that it's not just about SEN support as a separate kind of a subject, but it is the core to effective teaching. One thing that is that may be a little unique, I'm not too sure, is teachers can self-register. Teachers can also be nominated, and teachers are not required to complete a certain number of hours. At one time, we did encourage 100 hours of professional development a year. It looked like a workload to some teachers. So we've weaned that off and we've transited into TOTL. So teacher-owned, teacher-led. Where do you want to be in the next year, the next 3 years, 5 years? Conversations with their reporting officers, a learning needs analysis. These are some things that schools have and they discuss, and there is a whole buffet available. So teachers decide what they want to focus on and how they would like to do this, whether virtually, we also have face-to-face, so it's a whole range. PD, professional development, has also been defined not just attending things. Sitting down, discussing an article of interest is also professional development. So we have also broadened our definition of what professional development and learning is. I hope that answers the question. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your detailed explanation. Okay. 들어보니까 저에게는 사전에 첫째하고 친구하고.
So to me, it seems like thorough preparation is very important. And teaching methods for SEN are not just a separate domain. It should be the center of the school's work. So that was very impressive in her answer. Thank you very much for your answer.
So when we take a look at the second tier and third tier, so there is a very important role that the multidisciplinary team plays, and it is obviously important for them to work together well. So the multidisciplinary team, where do they belong? And also, what type of a cooperative body do they have? So I suppose the school and the multidisciplinary team would work together. So who makes that type of decision? Does the school make the decision to when they come in? How does that work?
Thank you very much for the question. So the multidisciplinary team is at every school and consists of a learning support consultant who is a teacher who has special education qualifications. The multidisciplinary team involves a psychologist, a social worker, a speech and language pathologist, and also an educational assistant who might support with behavior or autism. Each school has a multidisciplinary team assigned to them, although the members of the multidisciplinary team serve a variety of schools. So it's not that every school has one psychologist and one speech and language pathologist that is in the school all the time, but rather this is a group of people who supports a variety of schools. And the goal of this committee, this multidisciplinary team, is to bring different ideas from the variety of disciplines to the conversation to ensure that when we're speaking about a student who is struggling in whatever aspect it may be, that we have a fulsome conversation about all the aspects of their life that may be impacting that student's ability to learn at that time. So in some cases, it might be a cognitive impairment that is impacting their ability to learn. In other cases, it might be the social situation that the student finds themselves in at that time, and a social worker might be able to offer some suggestions or support. And in some cases, it might be looking at language development, and the speech and language pathologist would be able to offer some suggestions. So the hope is that by bringing this committee together, by sitting around and talking about it, and this is done with the permission of the family, certainly, it's not done without them knowing, but the hope is that by bringing a more fulsome conversation to a more fulsome group to the conversation, that we're able to think of different aspects outside of our own professional judgment, be that educators, we have a very specific lens. And so by opening up that dialogue, we're able to kind of think of different aspects that that might be able to better support and bring in other supports that may offer the students the opportunity to progress in a different way than when we might not have considered yet.
Does every school has that kind of organization or multidisciplinary team?
Yeah, every school in our district does have access to a multidisciplinary team.
어쩌면 우리도 팀은 있죠, 그죠?
So we do have that type of team as well. But I suppose there's a difference between how our team works and also how the Canadian team works.
Now I'd like to ask similar questions to our Korean teachers. You are working very hard on the ground, and it was very impressive that you have applied many different attempts and methods. It must be really challenging. Along the way, I'm sure you felt the need to increase and secure your expertise and professional skills. And your efforts should be supported by systems. One of you said that. So in order to generally apply the system, what kind of support do you need? What kind of environment do you think we need? Ms. Park, would you please go ahead first?
As of now, the Seoul Metropolitan Office of Education provides us teachers with a lot of support. So we have a mandatory training system as well. So we do get to learn more about basic academic skills. But as you know, teachers are already experts in education. So I think the meaning behind having that type of training is that we get together, and as we convene, we get to learn from one another. So even if people are not forced to learn and grow, rather teachers voluntarily learn and grow further. So I suppose it is important to sort of create an environment where students can grow. And there are a lot of opportunities that teachers have to learn and also increase our level of competency. If we are to sustain this type of program, what do we need? We need the funding from the government. If we can guarantee the inflow of that type of funding continuously, then we will be able to grow further and come up with better solutions. Thank you.
Ms. Yu? I concur with Ms. Park. I have similar thoughts. In my school, since we were designated as a future innovative school, there was one motive behind that designation. So it was a good motive for all the teachers at the school to work together. So as a task force, we worked together to think about how to ensure an enabling environment. And also between schools or within school, there are very active teacher study community. So this community actually created a culture and environment where teachers get together and discuss how to better teach their students. And also within the Office of Seoul Education, there are the teachers study community group between schools. So between schools, teachers get together in this community and they share their teaching methods and ideas. So these communities and discussion opportunities helped a lot to stimulate us further to be better teachers. So it seems like all the teachers in similar situations get together and form solidarity and share good practices, and they work together to come up with solutions. So that was one of the keys to finding solutions. So we also have questions from the floor. So among the audience, do you have any burning question? Would you please raise your hand? So if you raise your hand, you'll be given an opportunity to ask a question. Is there anyone over there? Would you please identify your name and affiliation? And then you can ask a question.
Hello. So I have nothing to do with the Ministry of Education.
Related to Korean education, but after I heard your lecture, I wonder. I would like to ask some questions to Ms. Carr from Singapore. I've heard that your country very values the cultural diversity in the field of education, and I really want to know why does your country value cultural diversity, and also it seems Korean educational field doesn't, well, in my opinion, it seems Korean educational field doesn't focus on cultural diversity as your country. If so, do you think it would be helpful, Korean government, Korean educational field focusing on cultural diversity would be helpful for our students, would be helpful for the sake of our student or the educational field in Korea? I would like to ask this question to you.
Okay. Why cultural diversity is valued in Singapore? Ours is a multicultural society. So even the representation here in this forum, Tengwi is Chinese, I'm Indian. And that's really what you will see as a core that makes up the population. So we have the Chinese, the Malay, the Indians, others, and now we do have quite a number of migrants who have made Singapore their home. We also do have the bilingual policy in education. So we take English and another subject. We call that our mother tongue. So for me, having been schooled in Singapore, my mother tongue, Punjabi, was not offered as a subject. So I took Malay in my education. So learning another language allows us to communicate, to understand, and to appreciate that diversity that we actually live in. I do speak a little bit of Chinese as well. Can't speak Tamil, but I do speak my own mother tongue, Punjabi. I guess when we talk about cultural diversity, it's about a celebration of that diversity to help us survive as a society. So in Singapore, we are blessed in the sense that it is part of our education system. We do have moral education as part of the curriculum. We have got citizenry and character education. We call it CCE as part of the curriculum for primary, secondary, and JC. So these are the ways that we teach in a structured way things like perspective taking, whether it's cultural based or based on different characteristics that a person brings into the classroom, which is going to feed into society. So I feel comfortable saying that it has worked for us, and there are definitely challenges as well, but there are more pros than cons in our experience. At least my own personal view as a student and as someone working meaningfully in the society.
So in Singapore and Canada, I suppose the multiculturalism is a given, but that's not the case in Korea. And if you take a look at elementary schools in Korea nowadays, we have a lot of students from multicultural families, which is why we are at a turning point to sort of look into that type of situation so that we can do better. We will have to sort of bring everybody in so that all the students can be included as well. Thank you. Thank you for your input. So any other questions at all? Right over there. So I only have time up until 5:40, so I think I have about 5 minutes.
In order to increase and improve basic academic skills, we heard really good examples from Singapore and Ottawa in Canada. So the tiered approach, this is something that I envy. So when I listened to the two presentations from the two teachers, I realized that because I'm so familiar with this, I forgot the value of the system we have had. So I have a question for these two guests from overseas. What was impressive about the education provided in Seoul? What are the good things you heard from the presentations about Seoul's education? You came here for the first time. I'm not sure whether they can address this question. So based on the presentations you heard today, would you please say something that you found very impressive about Korean education?
I'm happy to speak. So Peter and I had the opportunity actually to visit an elementary school in Korea as well. And so I'm very grateful for the opportunity to listen to your practice today. And I have to say that I hear a lot of similarities of the things that we are doing to support students' learning. I think specifically, I can speak to both of you in terms of the practice and the specificity of understanding that individual student in front of you, and really acknowledging that the student is struggling, and so what diagnostics do we need to do to understand that struggle, to provide an opportunity for them to take the next step forward. And so when I think about some of the examples that I shared, I think you spoke to them beautifully and provided very clear examples here in your country of how you have acknowledged that there is a learning gap and we need to take a step forward to support that student. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to have been here to learn amongst you. In our visit to the school, there were some really incredible things that both Peter and I will take back to Canada and share with our colleagues there around the different aspects of co-teaching that were happening in the classrooms. I think our model, we have a special education teacher teaching alongside, a very similar model that provides that opportunity for students to demonstrate their knowledge in different ways, but also to have the opportunity for immediate feedback so that if something isn't going correctly, we can correct in the moment and continue to move it forward. So thank you for sharing your practice today. Certainly, I appreciate learning alongside you.
I'm going to add to what Kate said. Difference is I haven't had the opportunity to step into any Korean school so far, maybe in the future. But what really impressed me as I listened to the sharing and I conversed with many of you here in the last 2 days is that sense of hope, that sense of wanting to support these students in a very sincere way. I also commented yesterday, as you know, I was talking to some of my colleagues over Zoom yesterday evening, you know, as they were asking me about this forum. They're also very excited to know more. I mentioned how intelligent the questions from the educators are. Not about why do we need to do this, and do you know that I have no time, or you know, this is so challenging, I may not have the skills, but really how do we do this? Assimilating a lot of what you hear into your questions and having that hope and that sense of resilience that this is something that I want to do and I can do despite the challenges. We share similar challenges in that our system is one that is relatively academic driven. The grades mean a lot, but despite that, we are here to think about and deepen our practice in terms of how we can reach out to these students who may be struggling. So I'm very impressed.
질문과 좋은 답변 감사드립니다.
Thank you for the questions and thank you for the answers as well. I was told that I have to wrap it up by 5:40, so I suppose I should conclude this open discussion soon. Yesterday I was here as well, and I was curious about what other countries are doing, and I got to learn, and so it was really interesting. And there were some similarities, and also there were some differences as well. So the philosophy is being highlighted and emphasized by other countries. So if you think about the basic academic skills and education, that's something that we should do every single day. And that notion is being shared by the global education community. And also the other countries, and according to the presenters, the system is in place and it is run very well. And the systematic support works quite well, which makes this whole operation better. So we have teachers' sort of ambition and also passion, but aside from that type of energy, it is important for us to have proper system in place, so that we can have both systematic support and the teachers' eagerness as well.
Thank you very much for today's great presentation and all kinds of great answers for the questions. Okay. Thank you very much. 이것으로 오늘 토론회를 마치도록 하겠습니다.
With that, I now conclude today's open discussion. Thank you very much.
I'd like to thank all these 6 speakers. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank all the participants joining us offline and online. We are conducting a satisfaction survey, so those here on site can participate in the survey here, and also those online participants can complete the survey form in the chat box. Now it is time to come to an end of this 2-day journey in order to help each and every one of our students, and also in order to ensure their rights to learn. We have put together this forum with experts from home and abroad. I'd like to thank all of you for spending time with us despite your busy schedule. I sincerely thank you all. So the student who only paid attention to insects completely changed thanks to the teacher who actually accommodates him as who he is. So I would like to show you the light drawing video one more time about that student. So with the screening of the video, I'd like to officially conclude the 2022 Seoul International Education Forum. Thank you very much.
peace of mind, 'cause I'm not the one to scream and shout.